And joining me now is Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. She's a sponsor of today's event, but she's so into this topic, we're gonna go for a deep dive with her. Since the pandemic struck, the AFT has been working to get students and teachers the support and resources they need, both in a virtual setting and now as schools reopen in hybrid forms and all forms. Randi, great to see you today. Look, I just want to start with the American Rescue Plan. I mean, you and I have been talking over the last year regularly about what the pathway is to get schools reopened, how to do it responsibly with all of the equities involved. I read the AFT report that was issued in April of last year. And so I'm just interested, are all the boxes now checked off that need to be checked off in the rescue plan?
The big boxes are checked off, Steve, and I think that first off, thank you for having me. I was glad to hear the representative beforehand that she is so inspiring. And I just kind of want to start by saying we begged, and you watched us, and I was on your show when we did it. We begged DeVos and Trump and the CDC to give us data to inform decision-making, including where COVID was, things like that, to give us the guidance in a truthful and transparent way about how you mitigate or eradicate transmission in schools of a respiratory disease, and to give us the resources to do it. It was like a 1, 2, 3. We begged everybody. We tried to figure it out ourselves. And what Joe Biden has done and this administration has done in 6 weeks is they have said, we're doing this. They are as focused on reopening schools as was the Trump administration, knowing full well that in-person instruction is key, not just to the economy, frankly, it is key to children and to getting children out of the social isolation they're in and getting them back into a routine and into school and into being with their friends and their colleagues. And what is happening is that there's now a roadmap. So the big issues are checked. The key is to this roadmap that for mitigation strategies, for testing, and for vaccine access to work as the roadmap to reopening schools, you have to have trust. And trust is earned by having people work together. And that's what you're seeing from agreements from New York City, the most recent agreement to reopen high schools near the end of March, to LA, UTLA and its school board just agreed to a strategy for reopening. Because when you have these agreements and educators trust that it's going to be safe, that is going to do more for parents, particularly Black and brown parents, to trust that it's safe than anything else. So we're really have, I think, turned the corner here because of the mitigation strategies. We need to have more testing so that we can keep things open. Testing shows, what is basically invisible spread because of asymptomatic spread, and with the vaccine access, that those three things and collaboration has been really the huge key to turning things around. So I would say that we are at the point by the end of March that there will be many, many, many more schools that are reopened than that are, for in-person learning, than are doing virtual learning.
Randi, if we were to dial back and go back a year before this pandemic was clear, before we declared, tomorrow is the day that this was declared a pandemic. And we were to have a conversation, the Steve Clemons, Randi Weingarten show, on what does the whole child need? What is the teacher's role in that? What is the community's role? What are parents? What are the services that need to come around? That was a complicated topic even before COVID hit.
Correct.
So my question is, how do we get back? Is this crisis an opportunity to rewire the social contract around children and education, and are we on the way to doing that?
Well, it's certainly the opportunity to, and the question about whether we're on the way to it is how we'll when I say we, I mean the entire community, will deal with the next few months. Reopening schools for in-person learning is only one step. Helping kids in a post-COVID world, helping families, helping educators, helping communities is frankly the much, much bigger step. And so all of those who think that all you have to do is open, and I'm a big believer in having summer school and having actually, summer for enrichment and for joy. But if anybody thinks that this crisis is over if we have 6 weeks of instruction over the summer and everything's going to be the same as it was last March, I don't know what they're smoking, because ultimately this crisis has changed virtually everything. And then we can actually rebuild and use it for the better, or we're going to be worse off. And so I think the good news is this, Steve. Number one, with this big emergency that's happened in the last year, everyone understands that in-person instruction is far better than virtual. Virtual can be a supplement, but it's not a substitute. And I do hope that this push for virtual charters, I hope it ebbs, because we need to have in-person instruction. Number two, we need to really address the needs of the whole child. Emotional and social needs are really important for children, for families, for all of our communities. And we're not going to know when some of the issues of being anxious because of social isolation for the last year show up. So that's why we need to wrap services around and really have those services intact, not just for kids, but for families, including for our educator families. And number three, this is the moment to really focus on science and civics. All too often, our schools are designed around English and math tests. We have just seen how important science is. We know how important it is in terms of climate. We've just seen how important civics is. So why don't we organize around powerful, meaningful instruction and project-based and team-based, so we get kids together, working together after this year of isolation. Right. So there's a real opportunity here, Steve, but we can blow it really quickly if we don't work together over the next few weeks and months to plan the next school year.
Randi, real quick, before I take a question from our audience, I just love, because we always talk about real stories. If I were, in the role of Joe Biden or a bunch of senators, and you were to tell a story of one of your teachers and how he or she just moved the needle in this stressed out time, do any stories pop into mind?
Yes, there's a story that Chalkbeat just did today about a teacher from Newark. Her name is Jockey, and how she, during this winter, went door to door to her students to actually make sure that they were okay. And so that story is in Chalkbeat right now, and you see a picture of her in the snow, trudging in the snow, talking to her kids, making sure they're okay. The virtual choruses, and as well as I do, Steve, how hard it is to actually put these choruses together. But you see kids in the virtual choruses, the virtual bands. You see teachers who've been sitting on the lawns of their kids, actually just making sure they have eye-to-eye contact, because they're saying to their kids, you're okay, because the kids have to be okay. Parents who have had the front row seat in overhearing Zoom classes to actually now see the skill, the magic, the art, and the science of teaching. Teachers have turned on the dime all year long to actually help their kids. The food service providers in Dallas that put together grab and goes on the buses so that we could feed kids. The hotspots that we were using in the North Country in New York to make sure that kids had various, had internet. The books that First Book and we delivered to homeless shelters so that kids had books of their own. These are just a fraction of the stories all across the country of educators really connecting with our kids to make sure that the kids were okay during this period of time.
I think Joe Biden would have a tear now. I mean, it's amazing stories. We have a question from Tom. Tom?
Hello, my name is Tom Bauer. I'm a retired middle school teacher from the Madison Public Schools. My question is, how can teacher unions be part of the transformation of education today? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I think that we have to actually start thinking about that we're all in this together. And what teacher unions do a lot is that we see, because we represent the people who are actually doing the work. So we see the issues from ground up. We see the issues through the lens of our lived experience is how we see kids learn from classroom up, as opposed to from top down. And so if we are given the right and the responsibility, and it's a responsibility as well as a right, to use collective bargaining for problem solving, to actually think through using the collective wisdom of our members, then we can actually really change things long-term for the good. That you don't have a strategy, as my mom used to say, who was a second grade teacher, you'd have the fad of the month, the strategy of the year, and it would go in and out with whoever the new superintendent was, and there would be over-promising and under-delivering. If you actually use the collective wisdom of our members, then that strategy is really going to be embedded in culture and the DNA of the school. So smaller classes, project-based instruction, having career tech ed as a viable alternative, making sure we have real pre-K, meeting the emotional, social well-being needs of kids, community schools. All of these ideas have come from educators about how we really address the needs of kids in a long-going and a real way. And we have to give teachers the freedom to teach, to have the latitude to actually make the judgment calls they need to make. We certainly did that last, March, when everything was closing and we had to rely on teachers to turn everything around. And, even though none of us really want remote education, we don't think remote education works as effectively as in school. What it is that you've seen how teachers turned on a dime to actually really engage kids. Let's actually trust them to do that more, give them the training and the support they need, and we will see a generation rise.
Well, Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, I really appreciate you sponsoring today's forum, and I look forward to talking about the time we can get back and kind of look at this broad question. I tweeted it today, I think you retweeted, of like looking at the secret sauce of America is education, right? That's what it's been. Right. And like how to get the equilibrium of all the players back in place. And we really appreciate you coming back to have these conversations with us.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you always for your time and your curiosity.
Thank you.